Morning, everybody. Let's just start with a couple of minutes meditation on the breath. So I think everybody knows how to do that. So now let's generate bodhicitta motivation for today's session. I think the purpose of my life is to lead all sentient beings from suffering to enlightenment. In order to do that, first I have to reach enlightenment myself. And that depends upon my completing the path to enlightenment, gaining all the realizations of all the steps on the path to enlightenment. And in order to do that, I need a guide, a teacher to show me the way. Therefore, to understand who would be a qualified guide and how to follow that guide, I'm going to participate in this class on spiritual teacher, in order to reach enlightenment for the sake of all sentient beings. So just, very briefly like that, generate bodhicitta motivation. Oh, I forgot the prayer. Okay, so so we've generated the spirit of the prayer. Let's actually do the actual prayer. Sangye Cherdang Zogi Chonam La Changchu Baru Dagni Yapsuchi Dagi Churjingi Pesonam Ki Drola Penche Sangye Drupa Sho Sangye Cherdang Zogi Chonam La Changchu Baru Dagni Yapsuchi Dagi Churjingi Pesonam Ki Drola Penche Sangye Drupa Sho. So you guys in the third line, we haven't finished. 3 times. So in the third line, it says Chernyen. Through listening to the Dharma, so you guys are supposed to say that. I'm supposed to say Churjin, Dagi Churjin, which means by the merit I create through giving the Dharma. So I hope I'm giving the Dharma, but that's the prayer. So okay, one more time. Sangye Cherdang Zogi Chonam Wa Changchu Baru Dagni Kapsuchi Dagi Churjinge Pesonam Ge Rola Penje Sangye Drupajo. Okay, that's 3 times. So they say we need to do these prayers 3 times because when we start, our mind may be a little distracted. So by the second time, we may be thinking a little more of the meaning. Hopefully by the third repetition, we're actually thinking of the meaning, understanding what the prayer says rather than just sort of mindlessly reciting these words. So I thought today, last time we were talking about the qualities of the teacher, the different kinds of spiritual teachers, but I thought I'd start today by reading a little bit of this advice on guru practice. This is in this book, Teachings from Tibet, Guidance from Great Lamas. So when I was running the meditation center, Tushita Center in Delhi, we used to have a lot of excellent teachers visit the center. Of course, Lama Yeshe, Lama Zopa Rinpoche stayed there all the time and gave teachings. And our regular teacher there was Gelek Rinpoche. He was, this is before he came to the West and before he had many Western disciples. In fact, you know, it was Lama Yeshe prompted him to teach at Tushita Center. So this is in the late 70s, early 80s. And up to that point, Rinpoche, Gelek Rinpoche had been spending a lot of his time publishing Tibetan texts that had been rescued from Tibet and weren't available outside of Tibet. So he he published many important Tibetan texts, but Lama Yeshe, but his English was pretty good. So Lama Yeshe really prevailed upon him to start teaching. And so he came to Tushita and taught, I don't know, every week, but fairly regularly anyway. And then he gave some private teachings to some Western students. And then I think that was the beginning of his getting invited to America and then eventually setting up the Jewel Heart Dharma centers. But we also had many teachers coming through Delhi. So His Holiness Ling Rinpoche taught at the center, and His Holiness Trijang Rinpoche taught at the center. And we organized teachings with His Holiness, not at the center. The center was too small. But that became known as Tushita's Dharma celebration. And we organized teachings at some of the big hotels. The first one, I think, was in 81. 82. Then it was fairly regular in the 80s, and then it became slightly not every year. And then other lamas passed through Delhi, Geshe Rapton, Geshe Zopa, His Holiness Sirkong Rinpoche, His Holiness Song Rinpoche, many amazing lamas, and so we always grabbed them to, sometimes some of them stayed at the center, and some of them, some of the higher, well-established lamas had their own Tibetan disciples in Delhi, and they'd stay with them and they'd come to the center. So we collected these teachings together, and there also, Bob Furman gave some talks there, and some Indian speakers came and gave talks on different topics. So we collected them together and published a book in 1981 called Teachings at Tushita. So that was quite a nice book. And then, so we revamped it to republish it in 2005, I think, as Teachings from Tibet. And we dropped some of the teachings that had been in the original book, and then we threw in some other teachings that weren't necessarily given at Tushita. Some were, but some weren't. And it seemed a good vehicle to publish some of the teachings that we'd received, like from Kunu Lama Rinpoche. We received commentaries on Adisha's Lamp for the Path and Lama Tsongkhapa's Foundation of All Good Qualities. Anyway, so another teaching was from this Gomchen Kampala called Advice on Guru Practice. So this Lama, Gomchen La, he's said to be the incarnation of Tangtong Gyalpo, very famous Tibetan master who lived, I think, 14th or 15th century. He was credited for building many iron bridges. He figured out how to make iron in Tibet, and he built many bridges in Tibet. And anyway, just amazing teacher, Tangtong Gyalpo. And so Gomchen La lived in a cave. When you go up to Laudo, when you walk from Lukla, the airport at Lukla, to Namche Bazaar on your way to Laudo or on your way to Mount Everest. So from Namche Bazaar to go to Laudo, you went pretty much due west, and to go to Everest base camp, or to the summit of Mount Everest, you went sort of northeast from Namche. So on the way to Namche, you follow this river, and then way up on one of the cliffs, there was a small hermitage where Gomchen La lived. So he was quite heavy, both from the Dharma point of view, heavy in Dharma knowledge, and physically heavy. So he found it a little bit hard to get around. I mean, he needed some assistance when he was walking. He came to Kopan a couple of times. So I don't know how he climbed up all the way up to this mountain, but I don't know if we all know Harry Sutton, Mary Colony's husband or partner. Harry was very close and spent quite a bit of time with Gomchen La up in the mountains in those early days. Anyway, he came to Kopan and gave this talk on advice on guru practice. So I'll just read a little bit of that. So he said, I've only spent one night at Kopan, but the feeling here is very good. This was in 75, I think. I think it's because everybody is living in refuge. It's the power of people's minds living in refuge, and they're becoming inner beings or Buddhists. In Lama Zopa Rinpoche's previous life, he lived in Solo Khumbu as the Laudo Lama. And at that time, you were probably also born around that area and made karmic contact with him. Because of that, and your good fortune as well, so he's talking to a bunch of Westerners, even though in this life you were born in far distant foreign countries, you found a teacher who can explain Dharma in your own language, which other lamas can't do. Therefore, you are greatly fortunate. You should take the opportunity, and in particular, take great care with your guru practice. There are many lamas from different schools, Nyingma, Kagyu, Gelug, and Sakya, who can explain the Dharma very well, but the problem is language. In Buddha Dharma, guru practice is the most important thing. In fact, the only object to whom we need pray is the guru, because the guru encompasses the entire triple gem, Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha. Therefore, first of all, it's necessary to find a perfect guru, but I'm not going to talk about that here. In the sutra teachings, we take refuge in Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha, but in Tantra, we take refuge in the guru. As it says in the Guru Puja, you are my guru, you are my yidam, you are the dakinis and dharma protectors. From now until enlightenment, I shall seek no refuge other than you. So this is the tantric way of taking refuge. You should try to actualize this, gain experience of it. Lama Zopa Rinpoche should explain this practice to you, and from your side, you should make heartfelt requests to receive teachings on the practice of Guru Yoga. So he's talking about Lama Zopa Rinpoche. Rinpoche is actually translating this teaching. So I'm not sure if he says it here or oh no, it's in the preamble, which I missed. Well, so Rinpoche gave this introduction. Gomchen La is a great meditator from the mountains of Solar Khumbu, not far from where I was born. He's originally from Tibet. He rejoices greatly that Western people are saying prayers and meditating on the Buddha Dharma because it's unusual, not normal. It's as if the impossible has happened. Therefore, he rejoices. I've asked him to give the Western students some instruction, and it seems he has much energy to do so. He's also saying that I should translate everything he says and not hold anything back. So he was praising Rinpoche. So Rinpoche was very reluctant to translate his praise of Rinpoche. I thought it was more explicit. Maybe it comes somewhere else. So you should make heartfelt requests to receive teachings on the practice of Guru Yoga. So I think our prayers for Rinpoche to explain the topic were fairly successful because finally this 500-page book on Guru devotion came out from Rinpoche's teachings on Guru devotion over the years. So up until this time, Rinpoche really hadn't taught that much on Guru devotion. I don't think there's much in that book, in Heart of the Path, that was given before this time. When I was in Tibet, this is Gongchen La speaking again. When I was in Tibet, I asked my guru to explain it to me, Guru Yoga, but he said, if I talk about Guru practice, it will look as if I'm praising myself, as if I'm saying, I am good, I am the best. And he would not explain it to me. He told me, you can study the details of Guru devotion practice in books to understand what it entails. If the Lama explains it, the disciples might think he's aggrandizing himself or boasting that he's the best. So, and I think this is one of the reasons that the Lamas didn't really teach traditional Guru devotion teachings much at the beginning, because, as we know in the Tantric, the subtitle of the book is Seeing the Guru as Buddha. So if these Tibetan Lamas explain to new students, well, you have to see, you have to see the Guru as the Buddha. In other words, you're saying, I am the Buddha if you take me as your Guru. Then, there'd be a strong chance that the meaning of that teaching would be misunderstood, and the students, those, especially those of us who weren't familiar with Guru practice and were a little bit skeptical of the whole Guru thing, they might think that he's just, trying to gather disciples, or wanting to accumulate wealth, or maybe have sex with the students. These negative projections can easily creep in if we're not familiar with the teaching. So for the first few years, we didn't really get too much in the way of teachings, and it may be because of what Gomchen La is saying here, what his teacher told him in Tibet. But if I talk about guru practice, it will look as if I'm praising myself. Anyway, he goes on, I rejoice that you're not only reciting prayers, but analysing the meaning of the teachings as well, thinking of the meaning and concentrating on the fundamental path. Say that there were many millions of billions of galaxies full of stupas, full of Buddha's relics, and every day you made offerings to all of them. There would be enormous benefit in that. But as it says in the Mahamudra teachings, meditating on the fundamental path for just a short time has more benefit than every day making offerings to millions of billions of galaxies full of stupas containing relics of the Buddha. Therefore, I thank Lama Zopa Rinpoche and all of you. So there are many people who can recite the words and give clear intellectual explanation of the teachings, but don't practice or analyze the meaning. Here you are doing both. Not only are you thinking about what the words mean, but at the same time, you're trying to put that meaning into practice. Study combined with meditation, meditating while receiving the teaching, is called experiencing the commentary. While the teacher is giving the commentary, the disciples try to gain experience of it. So that's a wise and excellent way to practice. So, that's the way that Rinpoche always explained that we should, when we're listening to the teachings, we should, be listening to them and using them as a mirror for our mind, and thinking, when this teaching, and after a while, we've heard a lot of these teachings many times. We shouldn't be sitting there thinking, "Oh, I've heard this. Why doesn't he talk about something new? Why doesn't he explain something else? I've heard this teaching many times." But, that's not the way to listen to the teaching. The way to listen to the teaching is to be thinking, whatever the teaching is, have I really understood this? And have I realized this teaching? So if we have the realization of the teaching and we recognize that, a feeling of great joy arises in our mind. But if we see that we have not realized the teaching, even if we have clear understanding, intellectual understanding of it, then it means we haven't heard the teaching enough, we haven't meditated on it enough, or we haven't meditated on it effectively enough, and or we haven't prepared our mind sufficiently to attain the realization. So not only do we need to understand the teaching and meditate on the teaching, which is like the seed of the realization, but as I always say, we need to prepare our mind through purification and creation of merit, so that when we meditate on the topic, the field of our mind will have been suitably prepared for us to gain the realization. So when we're listening to the teachings, that's what we should be seeing our mind reflected in the teaching and be thinking, have I realized this or not? So Gomchen La goes on, there's a prayer of request to the Guru that goes, magnificent and precious root Guru, please abide on the lotus and moon seat of the crown of my head. Guide me with your great kindness and grant me the realizations of your holy body, speech and mind. So what is the kindness to which this prayer refers? It's what's happening here at Kopan Monastery, being guided by the Guru, who out of his great kindness gives commentaries on the teachings and confers initiations which ripen the mind. With respect to the last line of the prayer, the essence of whatever deity you're meditating on, for example, Avalokiteshvara, is the Guru. Grant me the realizations of your holy body, speech, and mind. meditational deities are manifestations of the Guru. So when we request the realizations of our Guru's holy body, speech, and mind, we receive the blessings of the Guru's holy body, speech, and mind. These blessings purify the negativities of our own body, speech, and mind, which then become one with our Guru, holy body, speech, and mind. In other words, one with the Buddha's holy body, speech, and mind. So last time we talked briefly about the three kinds of gurus, the Hinayana guru, or the fundamental vehicle guru, the Mahayana Sutra guru, and the Mahayana Tantra guru. So these teachings are from a tantric point of view. Once the great Pandit and Yogi Naropa was reading texts in the extensive library of a great temple when a Dakini suddenly appeared out of the dark cloud in space in front of him and said, "You know the words, but you don't know the meaning." So I think I told this story last time, maybe. You know the words, but you don't know the meaning. Where can I learn the meaning? Naropa asked. She replied, there's a great yogi called Tilopa. You can receive the commentaries from him. Consequently, as directed by the Dakini, the great Pandit Naropa went to West Bengal in the northeastern part of India in search of his guru, Tilopa. So this is the area of Buxa. This is where in West Bengal, where a lot of the monk Tibetan refugees were sent after they fled into exile after the takeover of Tibet by the communist Chinese in 1959. A lot of them fled to Bhutan and northern India, and then Pandit Nehru gave the monastics this former British prison at Buxa as their sort of refugee colony. So that's where Lama Zopa Rinpoche met Lama Yeshe. He called it a concentration camp, but I'm not sure if he meant in the Nazi sense of the word, or the sense of this is where you went to develop single-pointed concentration, a meditation camp. Probably a bit of both. The British, Nehru was imprisoned there, and Gandhi and different people when they were trying to overthrow the British rule in India. So he went to West Bengal in search of Naropa, in search of this guru Tilopa. When he got there, he asked local people if they knew Tilopa. They said, there are two Tilopas, a rich one and a poor one, a beggar. There are two. So Naropa said, Tilopa, the guru I have to find, doesn't necessarily have to be rich or poor. Later, as he went around, he found Tilopa by the river, pulling fish from the water, cooking them over a fire and eating them. Seeing this, instead of criticizing Tilopa or being shocked by his behavior, he remained silent, not a hair of his body moved. He just stood there quietly without a single negative or disparaging thought and simply reflected, since sentient beings are so ignorant, in order to release them from ignorance and lead them to enlightenment, Tilopa has manifested in this form, catching fish and eating them. So thinking like this is one way of practicing Guru Yoga. In previous lifetimes, Naropa had created incredible merit and karma necessary to meet a guru such as Tilopa and never generate a single negative thought about him. Therefore, when he finally did meet this great guru, he realized he was a true saint and saw him in only a positive light. Similarly, you people have also created good karma in previous lives. In fact, your karma might even be better than that of Naropa, because you see your guru in a better aspect as a monk in robes. So I think if we come to Kopan and we'd seen Rinpoche fishing in a pond and eating the fish, cooking the fish over a fire, and eating, we may not have stayed, I don't know. So there's this very famous lineage of gurus and disciples, starting with Tilopa. So so this book, Golden Rosary Editions, I'm not quite sure who these guys are. Namo Buddha Publications from Crestone. So there's this book, The Life of Tilopa and the Ganges Mahamudra. So this is the life of Tilopa. And then his main disciple was Naropa. So there's this book published by Shambhala called The Life and Teachings of Naropa. So he was the one that Naropa saw the Dakini, and she told him to find Tilopa. So there's this life of Naropa. So Naropa was a guru of Mapa, the translator. This is also published by Shambhala. So the life of Mapa, the translator. So he used to go from Tibet to India to study with Naropa and bring back texts and translate them, and then transmit the lineage of teachings from Naropa, Tilopa, Naropa to Mapa. So Mapa became famous because he was the guru of Milarepa. So there's I think maybe 2 or 3 books of Milarepa life story. There's the original one by Evans Wentz from the 30s or 40s, whenever 50s maybe, when Evans Wentz translated that. There was a book called Tibet's Great Yogi Milarepa. This one by La Lumpur, by Tibetan, is actually more accurate and probably a better version of Milarepa's life than Evans Wentz's. The Life of Milarepa. And so then Milarepa had a number of disciples, Rechungpa, and then his main one was Gampopa. So the life of Gampopa was published by Snowline, which is now part of Shambhala. So the life of Gampopa. So there's this incredible lineage that we can of gurus that we can study and understand how these great yogis practiced with their gurus. So so that's the Kagyu lineage. Gampopa is the main founder of the Kagyu lineage, which has different divisions: Drigun Kagyu and Karma Kagyu, and maybe others. The main one, I guess, is the Karma Kagyu. It's the one that the Karmapa's the head of. Also, there's some stories of some of the great Gelug Lamas in this book by Jan Willis, called Enlightened Beings, published by Wisdom. So she explains the life stories of who are they? Jampel Gyatso, Chökyi Gyaltsen, Chökyi Dorji, Gyalwa Ensapa, Sangye Yeshe, and the first pension Lama Losang Chökyi Gyaltsen. So there's this lineage of the Gelug teachers. So, reading these life stories of these early practitioners is very inspiring, and helps us see how the professionals practice Dharma. So, good advice for us amateurs. Anyway, so Gomchen La talks a little more about the relationship of Naropa and Tilopa. So this book, it's one of the free books we published from the archive. And we had all these teachings on the Lama Yeshe website, lamayeshe.com. In fact, they might still be in connection with this book. But we also set up another, just to keep lamayeshe.com a little more focused on Lama Yeshe and Lama Zopa Rinpoche and His Holiness, and now Ursel, and then some sutras. But we had some teachings on there from many other teachers. So we, just to keep the lamayeshe.com a little more focused on the FPMT direct lineage, we established another website called teachingsfromtibet.com. So there are also these teachings and teachings from many other lamas on that website, including this. So you can read the whole thing there. So some of the trials and tribulations that Naropa put Tilopa through are mentioned there in this teaching. So I'm not going to do that now. So there's another story about the day that Tilopa hit Naropa on the head with his shoe so strongly that he passed out, Naropa. When Naropa came to, his mind and his guru's holy mind had become one. Whatever knowledge Tilopa had, so did Naropa. This was the result of his impeccable guru devotion and doing exactly what Tilopa told him to do. As the teachings explain, you have to decide completely that the guru is definitely Buddha. So just to emphasize, this is the tantric point of view, and it's not necessarily a practice that beginners should launch into without having been around and studied the teachings for a few years at least, I'd say. It varies with the person. You have to decide completely the guru is definitely Buddha. If you don't come to that conclusion, then no matter what Dharma practices you do, they won't be of much benefit. They won't become a quick path to enlightenment. There's a tantric point of view. Another teaching says, meditating on the guru's holy body is hundreds of thousands of times more powerful than meditating on trillions of deities in their various aspects. However, whatever deity you meditate on, you have to remember, this is my guru's holy body. You should not think this is the deity, the guru is something else. Also, following your guru's instructions is far more beneficial than reciting the deity's mantra trillions of times. There are two stages of the highest yoga tantra path to enlightenment, generation and completion. While there's great benefit in meditating on the completion stage, doing it for many eons pales in comparison to invoking the guru's holy mind just once. I don't have much more to say. I just wanted to say a few words about guru practice. So I'm simply emphasizing a few of the important points. As I mentioned, you should request Lama Zopa Rinpoche for teachings on guru devotion, and from your side, pray to the guru as one with the deity. But remember what my guru told me when I asked for teachings on guru practice. You can understand the practice of guru devotion by reading the texts. If I explain it to you, it will appear as if I'm extolling my own virtues, boasting that I'm the best of all. These days, people can't practice like the great pundits of old. It's very difficult. Instead of following our guru's orders like those fortunate beings did, we have a bad attitude towards our teachers. Instead of generating devotion, we criticize them. Instead of doing what they suggest, we do the opposite. However, even though we can't practice like those great pundits did, purifying their negativities by following their guru's orders. We can purify in other ways. For example, we can do prostrations, make mandala offerings, recite Vajra, sattva mantras, and so forth. So these are the practices we need to do to prepare our mind for realizations. The way to receive blessings is not to think that Avalokiteshvara, Chenrezig, is separate from your guru, but they are one. The really quick way to receive blessings is to concentrate on the guru and make your mind with his holy mind, like mixing water with milk. Don't think that Avalokiteshvara is somewhere else, beautiful than your guru, or has no relationship to the guru from whom you receive teachings. He's not like that. Avalokiteshvara or any other deity is the guru. This is what I really want to emphasize. Okay, so anyway, there's a little bit more there, but we'll put out the link for this. You can read this for yourself, the rest of the teaching. So that was that. So there's this little book we published a little while ago. It's out of print now, I think. This may be available print on demand, but it's online, the whole thing. Making Life Meaningful. So this had some different practices in it, and also it had a talk that Rinpoche gave in New York in '99. We were in New York for some teachings from His Holiness, and the Rinpoche was invited to give a talk to a group of Dharma students downtown. So so this is part of that talk. So again, proper guru devotion means seeing that your guru is Buddha. You know, the difficulty with that teaching, obviously, is if we make a mistake in deciding who with and make a connection with a spiritual teacher, so-called spiritual teacher, who may not necessarily be properly qualified, or who we haven't examined enough, or you know, a relationship that we've kind of rushed into, and then we hear this teaching that you know, our spiritual teacher, we have to regard the teacher as a Buddha, and as a Buddha, as omniscient mind, is kind of infallible. And then the teacher starts doing weird things, then it can cause great disruption in our mind, you know, and you know, over the last 20, 30 years, I think we've seen, read a lot of horror stories about, you know, teachers who have exploited their students either for money or for sex or for visas to stay in the West. I mean, there's all kinds of motivations that aren't necessarily good. So I think, you know, we've had well, anyway, I don't want to talk too much about that, but we have to check a teacher very carefully before we establish a guru-disciple relationship, because once we've established that Dharma connection, as Rinpoche calls it, that guru-disciple relationship, and we've decided that this is our guru and this is the Buddha, then if we renounce that relationship, if we don't practice our guru devotion properly, then karmically that creates a lot of damage in our mind, and we won't, in future lives, it'll be very, very hard to meet a guru again. And, I don't know if I've gone into much detail about the schism that happened in the FPMT back in the early 80s at Manjushri Institute in England. I talked about that? Okay, well, I'm not going to either. But just very briefly, so I'll mention it because of the advice that Rinpoche has given people who were caught up in that situation. So the first Western centre that was established was Chenrezig Institute in Australia in the mid-70s. In fact, that was the Lama's first visit to the West. They came here to the States and they went to Australia and New Zealand. That was their first trip to the West. And land was offered to them in Australia, and they founded Chenrezig Institute there before they left in 74. And that became the first Western Dharma centre. Actually, the very first was so-called Bodhicitta Center for the Development of Human Potential, some long name like that, in Indiana. So, the Lamas first, in 74, their first part of the trip was come to the United States. And one of the students, Louis Bob Wood, who'd been at the 5th course at Kopan in 73, invited them to speak to her friends in Indiana, Nashville, Indiana, near not far from Bloomington. And so the Lamas they visited and gave a couple of talks there, and established a centre called Bodhicitta Centre for Development of Human Potential, something like that. And most of Louis Bob's friends were Christians. They were sort of into mystic Christianity. And Louis Bob, or one of them, had a bookstore, sort of an esoteric bookstore in Nashville, Indiana. And anyway, so a few of them kind of got into Buddhism. And then the Lamas came back in 75 and gave a 2 or 3 week meditation course for those students in Indiana. And then, but the centre never really got off the ground there. And then when we started the FPMT as a sort of umbrella organisation to, I guess, oversee the activities of these different centres, was just starting to crop up in the West. The students there in Indiana didn't want to be part of an international organisation or whatever their reasoning was anyway. So that centre fell out of existence. So then the one that started a few months later in Australia, Chenrezig, became the first established FPMT centre. And then in 75, as I said, the Lamas travelled to different places, more centres started in 75, 76, 77. And then at the end of 75, Lama Yeshe created the FPMT organisation. So the idea was to send Geshis to these centres to become their resident teachers. And so the first resident Geshe was Geshe Loden, who went to Australia to Chenrezig Institute. And then in 75, the students in England wanted to start a centre, and Lama gave it the name Manjushri Institute, and they found this place in Cumbria, in an old priory, which they bought in North England, in the Lake District. And the second Geshe was to be sent to the West by the Lamas. Kelsang Gyatso was sent to Manjushri Institute. And so he gave a lot of teachings, and both the Geshe Loden in Australia and Geshe Kelsang Gyatso's teachings in England were quite popular and successful. But at the end of the Geshe Loden's 3-year contract in Australia, he left to start his own centre and his own organisation. And Kelsang Gyatso also, while he was teaching at Manjushri, started his own centre, another centre in York called the Madhyamaka Centre. And in both those cases, there was some unhappiness, maybe you could say, from the students who were running the centres, because these Geshes starting their own centres sort of split the energy of the centre. And whereas they were supposed to unify and the centre and make it stronger and more successful by starting their own organisations, their own centres, it in fact weakened the FPMT centre that they were supposed to be serving. So after that experience, there was kind of a Geshe contract was made where they were, during their time at the FPMT centre, they were not allowed to start, or they agreed not to start their own centres and to focus all their energy on the FPMT centre they were at. But anyway, I think this agreement wasn't, I know this agreement wasn't in place when Kelsang Gyatso went to England. And so when his 3 years original 3-year contract was up and he had his own centre, the FPMT organisation, under the direction of Lama Yeshe, wrote to him and said, okay, it's fantastic, you've been at this centre for 3 years, but you've got your own organisation, so now don't worry about us, we'll find another teacher to take your place. You can now go off and develop your own centres. So they wrote this letter, and when the students at the centre at Manjushri Institute in England got the letter, they freaked out. They said, these guys, they're sacking our Geshe, we love our Geshe, we don't want him to go. And, and over those 3 years, he'd built up a very loyal following of students, Kelsang Gyatso. So to cut a long story short, they decided they didn't want to be the students there didn't want to be part of the FPMT. And despite Lama Yeshe's great plans for Manjushri Institute, which was to form a large international Buddhist college where, the Geshe studies could be taught formally to Western students, and it could be a place in the West where Western students became Geshes. That whole plan fell apart, and they kind of seceded from the FPMT and formed their own organisation. And eventually he called his organisation the New Kadampa Tradition, and they fell out with His Holiness, and over this practice that of a protector called Shugden. I don't know if you've heard all these stories, but you can read all about the Shugden situation on the FPMT website. So then at that time, in the mid-80s, a lot of students were, 83 actually, a lot of students were forced to decide who they were going to follow, Lama Yeshe and Lama Zopa Rinpoche or Kelsang Gyatso. And so our lamas, Lama Yeshe, Lama Zopa Rinpoche, were the gurus, a lot of these students, and so was Kelsang Gyatso. And so it was a very bitter time. And some of us felt that as a result of this dispute and a lot of students renouncing Lama Yeshe and Lama Zopa Rinpoche as their gurus and deciding to follow Kelsang Gyatso, they created a tremendous amount of negative karma. And a lot of confusion. And, some of us felt that this actually shortened Lama Yeshe's life, that, within a year, Lama Yeshe passed away. This happening, Lama Yeshe passed away. And so there was this dilemma, that Lama Yeshe is a Buddha and Kelsang Gyatso is a Buddha, and they're giving completely different advice, so what to do. So, and people wrote to Lama Zopa Rinpoche later on after Lama had passed away, and they had this conflict of, what to do. So Rinpoche gave advice, which is in his online advice book at lamayeshe.com, of how to separate from a guru without transgressing your guru devotion. So how to leave a guru, so basically, if you want to follow Kelsang Gyatso, how not to create negative karma with Lama Yeshe. Or if you wanted to follow Lama Yeshe, how not to create negative karma with your other guru, Kelsang Gyatso. So I'm just mentioning that because this was a real life situation that happened, and Rinpoche has given advice. And now I can't remember, but whether that some of that advice is in this book or not. But I'll look it up and find out for next time. So if you've made a mistake and you've created a Dharma connection with a guru who you feel you can no longer follow, you can't renounce that guru without creating incredible negative karma. So there's a way to deal with the situation by thinking, well, this, I'm an ignorant sentient being and this is an enlightened being, and this enlightened being is employing skillful means that I don't understand. So I'm not going to say that, oh, this is not a guru, this is not a Buddha after all. But this is too difficult for me to follow this teacher, so I'm going to rely on my other teachers, and without losing respect for this other teacher, I'm not going to follow that teacher. I mean, however you want to think about it, but somehow like that. But the moral of the whole story is we must not rush into this guru-disciple relationship without very carefully checking the qualities of the guru and the qualities of the guru's students and the quality of the guru's teachings. So in terms of Kelsang Gyatso, so people called him Geshe Kelsang Gyatso, but later, after he split with His Holiness, Kopan Monastery actually wrote a letter that said that he wasn't really a Geshe, that he'd never completed his Geshe studies, and they sort of expelled him from the ranks of Sera because he was so against His Holiness. And it was largely over the practice of this spirit, Dorji Shugden, who the followers claim is a manifestation of Manjushri, who is a Buddha, and His Holiness says that this Dorje Shugden is not a manifestation of Buddha, but is a spirit, negative, a harmful spirit. So there's a lot about this online, and Wisdom published a book about this whole situation. So if you want to research it, there's plenty of material for you to research. But I don't know if you were around then, but in the 90s, these New Kadampa tradition followers, these followers of Kelsang Gyatso, demonstrated against His Holiness, outside His Holiness' teachings. Have you seen that? When His Holiness would be teaching in London or New York or all different places, there'd be this large crowd of people shouting that he's the false Dalai Lama and he's not, his teachings are not reliable and not to be followed. And then eventually, I think after a few years of doing this, they came to the conclusion that it was counterproductive to their own organization's development and mission, so they stopped doing these demonstrations. It was a very weird thing, the whole Dorje Shugden situation. But anyway, I don't want to go into that anymore right now. So proper devotion means seeing that your guru is a Buddha. Based on quotations of Buddha Vajradhara or Shakyamuni Buddha, logical reasoning, and your personal experiences with your guru, the special qualities you have seen, you train your mind to look at your guru as Buddha, free of all mistakes and complete in all qualities. You must see as Buddha all teachers with whom you've established a Dharma connection. A Dharma connection is established when from your side you recognize the teacher as guru and yourself as disciple. Even if all you've received from this teacher is the oral transmission of just one mantra or one verse of teaching. Supporting this view with quotations of the Buddha, logical reason, and your experience of particular qualities you've seen within that teacher. In this way, then, you see your guru as Buddha, as pure. Proper guru devotion, correct devotion to your virtuous friends, allows you to actualize successfully all realizations of the steps of the path to enlightenment, from perfect human rebirth up to Buddhahood itself. His Holiness the Dalai Lama mentioned analysis of the guru's qualifications. The qualification needed to teach the lesser vehicle path is to accomplish the accomplishment in the three higher trainings: morality, concentration, and wisdom. In order to teach the Mahayana, the teacher needs more than that. He or she should have the 10 qualities mentioned in Maitreya Buddha's teachings, the ornament of Mahayana Sutras. So I'm not going to translate these word for word. We just mentioned their meaning. So we talked about these last week. So Rinpoche just runs through them briefly, so it doesn't hurt to remind. The first three qualities: a Mahayana guru should be accomplished in the three higher trainings. Moreover, so it's, morality, patience, and wisdom. Morality, concentration, and wisdom. Moreover, since we're talking about practicing Dharma, fourth, the teaching should have more good qualities than you do and greater knowledge of Dharma. 5, the teaching should have perseverance. And 6, his holy mind should be enriched with scriptural understanding, having received lineage of the teachings. Also, number 7, your teacher should have realized emptiness. Now, I've already mentioned that the guru should be accomplished in the three higher trainings, one of which is the training in higher wisdom. So why is the realization of emptiness mentioned again here? The difference is that here, the realization of emptiness refers to the Prasangika Madhyamika view, the view of emptiness according to the higher of the two Madhyamika schools, the Prasangika school. This particular view of emptiness is the only one that can eradicate the actual root of samsara, the specific ignorance that causes all the other delusions and karma. and the suffering that sentient beings experience. There's only one root of samsara. That specific ignorance can be cut only by the prasangika view of emptiness and not by the view of any other school. So that is the seventh quality your teacher should possess. So last time we said that the difference between this third quality of the wisdom as part of the three higher trainings is the wisdom realizing the emptiness of the self. And the seventh one is the wisdom that realizes not only the ultimate nature of the self, but the ultimate nature of all existent phenomena. So remember, we have these two levels of ignorance, or two obscurations. The nyundip, the obscurations due to the delusions, and the shedrip, the obscurations to omniscience, or the obscurations to knowledge. So the first one, the gross ignorance, is what keeps us in cyclic existence. So when we realize the emptiness of the one's own mind, the self, and one attains liberation, but one's still not enlightened because there's all these imprints of beginningless delusions on our consciousness. So these are called the obscurations to knowledge. So these are then removed through further meditation on emptiness, with the motivation of bodhicitta, with the motivation to reach enlightenment. So gradually we eradicate all these subtle obscurations. So once we've eradicated the subtle obscurations, we reach enlightenment. So that's what's meant by the seventh quality, the view of emptiness. So there are these two ways of looking at it, I guess. Although it's also said that to become an arhat, to escape from cyclic existence, to cut the root of cyclic existence, we actually need to realize the prasangika view of emptiness. So I'm not quite sure what distinction Rinpoche is drawing here. So the final three qualities are skill in explaining the Dharma, compassion for the students, and not being lazy when it comes to giving teachings and guiding disciples. The guru should not have the attitude, it's too difficult, or I can't be bothered teaching. Even if the teacher doesn't have all 10 qualities, he should have as many as possible. 10 qualities. So the qualities of the guru are also mentioned in the 50 verses of Guru devotion and the Guru Puja in the section praising the qualities of the guru. So, as we've seen before, the commentary, Lama Tsongkhapa's commentary on 50 verses of Guru devotion is this one, Fulfillment of All Hopes, published by Wisdom. And the Guru Puja, you're familiar with that. Having a well-disciplined body, speech, and mind, great wisdom and tolerance, a sincere, straight mind without the cunning of hiding one's own mistakes, and the 10 inner qualities are required to teach highest yoga tantra, and the 10 outer qualities required to teach the lower tantras. However, whether you can see all these qualities or not, so the subheading here is your teacher must emphasize morality. However, whether you can see all those qualities or not, the essence is to have a teacher who emphasizes morality. The one basic, important, fundamental quality to look for is the teacher's emphasis on morality. Pratimoksha, Bodhisattva, and those who practice Tantra, the Tantric vows. So these 3 levels of vows. A teacher who does not stress moral conduct cannot even lead disciples to good rebirths in their next lives, let alone liberation from samsara and enlightenment. So these are the very essential fundamental practices. Without the practice of morality, there's no enlightenment, no liberation from samsara, not even good rebirths in future lives. I'm not saying that in order to receive a good rebirth, you have to take all these 3 levels of vows. But in order to receive a good rebirth, you must at least keep the pratimoksha vows, the vows of individual liberation. Okay, so death can come at any time. At any minute you can die. Therefore, if you're going to die today, at least you must be sure of getting a good rebirth. You must be completely sure that you are not going to fall into the hell, hungry ghost, or animal realms, where you'll be completely overwhelmed by suffering. Even when we're sick or the weather is hot, we human beings can't meditate. If we compare our lives to those of sentient beings in the lower realms, we have incredible freedom, incredibly luxurious lives. Nevertheless, when we experience problems, we cannot practice Dharma. Beings in the lower realms are totally overwhelmed by suffering and have no opportunity to practice at all. Therefore, you have to guarantee that when you die this year, this month, this week, or even today, you will not be reborn in the lower realms. You must make sure you receive a good rebirth. And for this, you have to prepare right now. The best preparation, the main course for receiving a good rebirth is practicing morality. So there's a bit more on that. Therefore, emphasis on morality to inspire morality in the disciples is a very important quality to look for in a teacher. It gives you incredible freedom. If you take precepts and live in them purely, you're giving yourself freedom, liberation from samsaric suffering and enlightenment. It's also extremely important for your guru to have maintained pure samaya, a good connection with his or her own gurus, because the extent to which a teacher can benefit his disciples and cause them to have realizations depends on his own samaya with his gurus. If you devote yourself correctly to a virtuous friend whose samaya is good, even if he gives you only a few words of instruction, because of the purity and power of his samaya, his sacred words of honor, his commitments, those words can have an incredible effect on your mind. They can generate strong feelings of compassion, renunciation, impermanence, and death, or even precipitate a realization of emptiness. If your guru does not have pure samaya, there's always the danger that you will receive mental pollution or make the same mistakes with your gurus as he did. So any questions at this point?
Don't be shy, anyone. Please speak up.
Yeah, come on, everybody, speak up.
Hello, Dr. Nick. Hello,
Hi.
it's Anna.
Hi, Anna.
Hi there. Just a question about giving up a guru or the guru giving up you. How could you purify this with like Vajrasattva practices and more formal purification practices? Within this lifetime, but also within this dynamic is the guru wasn't necessarily qualified to be a guru in the first instance. So I don't know whether to continue visualizing this guru, in my practice or not, or.
So you're talking about a personal experience?
Yes.
So did you, in your mind, were you consider this person a guru and yourself as a disciple?
Completely, yes.
Yes, so first of all, any mistakes that have been made can be purified. As Lama Yeshe always said, there's no negativity that can't be purified. So it means all negatives can be purified. And, the standard practice is the Vajrasattva. And, if it's, you feel you've done made some serious transgressions, then it's important to purify. And if you can get away and do a 3-month retreat at some point and really do 100,000 recitations, and then that's the best thing to do. But there's also another practice, in some of the other Tibetan traditions, Nyingma, Sakya, sure about Sakya, Kagyu, there are these 4 or 5 preliminary practices. I'm going to get into trouble if I can remember them, but let's see. There's 100,000 prostrations, 100,000 mandala offerings, 100,000 guru mantra recitation, 100,000 refuge, and 100,000 vajrasattva.
Okay.
So I think those are the 5 regular preliminary practices. So if you're going into a 3-year retreat, you would spend a year prior to that preparing your mind for the retreat by doing all these purification practices and creation of merit. So when we do the 100,000 prostrations, I'm not sure how this is done in other traditions, we do them with the 35 Buddhas. And with the Vajrasattva, Lama Yeshe gave us Haruka Vajrasattva, highest yoga tantra aspect of Vajrasattva, so we do Haruka Vajrasattva. For the Guru mantra, we do 100,000 recitations of the Miktsema. Migmetsewe says, the Lama 5-line Lama Tsongkhapa praise, sometimes called a mantra. We do 100,000 recitations of that in the context of the practice of the Ganden Lagema, the 100,000 deities of the land of joy, or the hundreds of deities of lands of joy. Ganden Lagema. Hundreds of deities, countless deities, really, what it means. So we do Lama Tsongkhapa Guru Yoga, and we do the 100,000 recitation in the context of that.
Okay.
Then refuge, I think we just do Lama La Kap Suchiwo, refuge in the Guru, Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha, 100,000 of those. And mandala offerings, I think just do them, you do the long mandala and then you do the Sashi Perki over and over again. I haven't done it, so I'm not quite sure. So those are the 5 basic ones, but we have 4 extra ones in the Gelug tradition. We have making 100,000 tsatsas. So there are 9 preliminaries in Gelug tradition. So there are those 5 plus 100,000, making 100,000 tsatsas. So you can make little stupas or little images of Buddha or Tara, whatever your teacher tells you to do. 100,000 tsatsas, 100,000 water bowl offerings. So there's, the Rinpoche has put out this little booklet from the FPMT called Setting Up an Altar and Doing Water Bowl Offerings. So you can read all about that, the details there. So you do 100,000 of those. So ideally, we do this 100,000 in a retreat, whether it takes a month or 2 months or 3 months. That's the best way to do any of these practices. But if you can't get away because of work or family or other obligations, some kind of virus, then can also do it as a daily practice, ideally 1 session in the morning and 1 session in the evening, where you do, a bunch of, 108 water bowls in the morning, 108 in the evening, something like that. And then over, 500 days, maybe a couple of years, you may complete that particular practice.
Wow.
Someone say something?
Sorry, that was me. Thank you.
I'm not done yet.
Okay.
Get back to you in a minute. So then there's, so getting back to you, Anna, then there's these other two preliminaries. Okay, so we've got these 5, then we've got the water bowls, we've got the tsatsas, then we've got the Dorji Kadro fire puja. So Dorji Kadro fire puja, have you done that? Are you familiar with that practice?
No.
So there's you can get the practice from the FPMT, and we used to do this with Lama sometimes after he'd given a tantric commentary on something or other. But it's basically you visualize all your negative karmas, delusions, sickness, spirit harm, stupidity, mistaken actions. You visualize all those in you visualize all of those in a bunch of black sesame seeds. And generally the sesame seed is made into the shape of a scorpion, which is a kind of a nasty, negative, bitey thing. And then so you visualize all these things we want to get rid of in the black sesame, and then you have a little fire in front of us, and then reciting the mantra and doing this Dorji Kadro Vajradhaka practice. You visualize a fire with this deity, and the deity Vajradhaka is like this wrathful looking deity with a wide open mouth looking up like this.
Yeah.
And visualize throwing all your negativities in this into the mouth of Dorji Kadro in the fire, and it all gets burnt up. So you really visualize purifying like that. So so that can be quite powerful because it has this kind of physical thing of throwing all your negativities into the fire, into the mouth of the deity. So there's that practice. So we do that 100,000 times, the mantra. So that's also powerful for purifying, as well as Vajrasattva purification. You can do the Dorji Kadro fire puja and purify all the negativities, but in particular negative created with the guru. And then finally, the 9th practice, preliminary, is called Samaya Vajra, or Damsik Dorji. And that is particularly powerful for purifying broken samayas or commitments, tantric commitments. So when we take an initiation from a guru, sometimes we'll get commitment to do a daily practice, like a sadhana, or a certain number of mantras to recite each day or something like that. And then, so if we break that commitment, create negative karma by not following through on that, we break that commitment, then we can purify that most powerfully by doing the Samaya Vajra practice, Damsik Dorji practice. Or if we've broken our relationship with our guru, like you're mentioning, then that's also, this Samaya Vajra practice is also powerful for doing that. So Lama Yeshe gave teachings on that practice, I think, in Italy one year. I'm not sure if that teaching's online or not. I'll have to see. We did publish it in the 80s as a little transcript, as a little booklet from Wisdom, but I don't think that's certainly not available in print anymore. I'm not sure if we put it online or not. Samaya Vajra or Damsik Dorji. So it's possible to practice. It's possible to do those purification practices to purify that heavy negative karma. But then going forward, also, it's important not to have any negative thoughts about the guru who you feel that you don't want to be a disciple of anymore. You're always a disciple. You should feel that you're always a disciple of that guru, but you're respectfully not going to follow those teachings anymore because they may not be. You feel they may not be suitable for your mind. So anyway, something like that.
We still speak and have, you know, a good relationship that way. Yeah, can't really say no much more really without it sounding negative.
Yeah.
So,
Anyway, I think it's important to maintain. Once you've established the view that this is a Buddha, then you're not supposed to say, "Oh no, it's not." But you know, someone remind me, Mary, one of the Marys, to look up to see if Damsik Dorji is online and to see where Rinpoche's advice about people who are having a conflict with a guru they maybe don't want to study with anymore. Can you remind me to find those?
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Dr. Nick.
Okay, so so we'll send that out.
I am currently making my way through this.
Wonderful. So there'll probably be something about it in there as well, you know.
Yeah.
Okay, I can't look it up now, but you know, we're all scholars, so we all have to do our own research as well.
Yeah.
You know, what we can do in these sessions is quite limited, really, mainly because of, you know, my limited knowledge, but also because a lot of these topics, there's so much to learn, you know, and so that's why I, you know, hold up all these books and suggest these references, because, you know, we're here for a couple of hours, but then they have the whole rest of the week, you know, 6 days and 6 days and 22 more hours in between these sessions. So that's a lot more time for you to learn stuff than what you're going to learn in this couple of hours from someone who doesn't know much, and the time is so limited as well, you know. So, but now we're so fortunate, you know. 50 years ago when I first got involved, there was nothing. Well, you know, I mean, now look how many Dharma books there are on this table. I mean, can you imagine, like, when we first got involved in this, there was virtually nothing in English. And of course, none of us spoke Tibetan. So it's such an amazing time to be able to study all these teachings in such depth, you know, and you know, as I said before, there's this amazing series of books by His Holiness and Venerable Thupten Chodron. There's a Library of Wisdom and Compassion, 5 volumes out now. There's going to be 10 or 11 volumes by the time they're done. And then, you know, the series that Wisdom are doing with Thupten Jinpa, I don't know if you can see, am I pointing at a bookshelf? There's this library of Tibetan classics that Wisdom is doing with Thupten Jinpa. I think there's going to be 32 volumes. Like, amazing teachings in those books, translations of incredibly important texts. The Library of Tibetan Classics, yeah, that the Wisdom are doing with Geshe Jinpa. You know, not to mention so many other countless books. So, you know, if the time, well, like Gomchen Kampala said, you know, that if we can't study with our teacher, you know, there's so many books that we can study. So we really should take advantage of this opportunity we have, you know. Okay, so so then in this talk, so I'll give you the link for that as well, if you remind me, someone. So it's called The Purpose of Life, the chapter. So then Rinpoche talks about the 9 attitudes of Guru devotion. So now I'd like to read the 9 attitudes of Guru devotion that Lama Tsongkhapa explained in the Lamrim Chenmo, which I translated during the Vajrasattva retreat at Land of Medicine Buddha in early 1999. So I'm not going to give much explanation here. I just want to read through it. Those of you who have studied this subject will understand it. Those who haven't will get some idea of it. Guru devotion. Reading this teaching is very helpful, especially if your mind is experiencing difficulties with your guru. It's like an atomic bomb. It makes all those difficult thoughts vanish completely. What follows is not from the Lamrim Chenmo itself, but these 9 attitudes are mentioned there. The text, Practicing Guru Devotion with the 9 Attitudes, was actually written by Shabkat Sogdruk Rangrol, a Nyingma Lama who received teachings from Gelug Lamas, who taught the Lamrim in the way, and he taught the Lamrim in the way that Lama Tsongkhapa did. Shabka's presentation is so effective that I translated it. So Shabka, you know, if you want a bit of light reading, this Life of Shabka, Autobiography of a Tibetan Yogi, translated by Mathieu Ricard. So this is only, what, 600 or 700 pages, but the pages are in 2 columns, so they squeeze in more. So just reading the lives of these previous teachers is so inspiring, you know. It's kind of frustrating because, you know, we feel they had the luxury of wandering around the mountains of Tibet doing nothing but meditate in caves. And here we are stuck in the West having to earn a living. So, you know, but instead of getting mad, we should make prayers of aspirations that we can become like that and have the freedom to practice like these great lamas, scholars, yogis did in the past. So this Life of Shabka, this is published by Snowline. I don't know if it's still in print, now part of Shambhala. And then those books I held up before, like Tilopa, Naropa, Mapa, Milarepa, Gampopa, those life stories too. Really, really inspiring. And not just their life, but their teachings, of course, as well. So this is Shabka. So also His Holiness mentions so, you know, I was reading from this book last week from volume 2, Foundation of Buddhist Practice, where His Holiness talks about spiritual teacher in a couple of chapters. And when we're talking about the 3 types of teachers, you know, the Hinayana, the Mahayana Paramitayana, and the Mahayana Tantric teacher, Shabgar said, "From the teacher who showed the path of deliverance, I received the sacred teachings of individual liberation. My practice was to shun wrongdoing and cultivate virtue." So that's what Rinpoche, Lama Zopa Rinpoche kept mentioning. You know, most important thing that our teacher can teach us is morality. Because without practice of morality, we can't even get an upper rebirth. Then Shabkar says, from the Bodhisattva teacher, I received the sacred Mahayana teachings on generating bodhicitta. My practice was to cherish others more than myself. So that's the essence of bodhicitta, banish self-cherishing and promote cherishing others. From the Vajradhara teacher, I received the sacred teachings, empowerments, instructions of the secret mantrayana. My practice was to meditate upon the generation and completion stages and Dzogchen, great completion. So that was his experience of studying with the 3 levels of teacher that we talked about last week. In terms of this teaching he gave on Guru devotion, the 9 attitudes. So do you guys do Guru Puja twice a month?
Yes. Sometimes we do Huruka Vajrasattva Tsog instead, but yes, we do.
And so do you do the combined, the Lama Chopa Jorcha that Rinpoche has put together? Or do you just do the straight Lama Chopa?
Just straight Lama Chopa that ends with what, LC 100 or something? I think, yeah, we just do the straight Lama Chopa.
So the Lama Chopa Jorcha is Rinpoche's Guru Puja on steroids. So it combines it adds to it enriches the standard Guru Puja with these extra practices like this one, like 9 attitudes of Guru devotion. So when we're doing the Lamrim, so when you do Guru Puja, do you do the Bodhisattva and Tantric vows?
Yes, we do.
Yeah, so Rinpoche's added that. That's not in the standard practice. And then when it comes to the Lamrim prayer at the end, and then Rinpoche put in a whole lot of other practices like the bath offering. Do you do that? No.
No, we don't.
No, so that comes from Jorcha. Jorcha means preliminary practices. So when we were first at Kopan, the first monks and nuns, when we started the IMI at Kopan, and we had our little monastic community there for the first 2 or 3 years, till 74, 75, 76, till we got thrown out by the Nepalese government. Our morning puja was not the Guru Puja, but it was the Jorcha, the preliminary practices. So Rinpoche has taken certain bits of the preliminary practices and inserted them into the standard Guru Puja, so that we do. Who's been to the Light of the Path retreats in North Carolina? Anybody? So
online, just online probably.
Yeah, so there we do Guru Puja Jorcha in the morning. So we do Rinpoche's enhanced Guru Puja there. And so in the when we do the Lamrim prayer after the first verse 84, which is about the Guru, then we do this, then we recite the 9 attitudes of Guru devotion. And then later on, when there's the practice on bodhicitta, then Rinpoche has added the 8 verses of thought transformation from Geshe Langri Tangpa. So there's these different additions that Rinpoche has made to the Guru Puja, and this is one of the additions, this 9 attitudes of Guru devotion. So it says, I'm requesting the kind Lord Root Guru, who is more extraordinary than all the Buddhas, please bless me to be able to devote myself to the qualified Lord Guru with great respect in all my future lifetimes. By realizing that correctly devoting myself to the kind Lord Guru, who is the foundation of all good qualities, is the root of happiness and goodness, I shall devote myself to him with great respect, not forsaking him even at the cost of my life. Thinking of the importance of the qualified Guru, may I allow myself to enter under his control. So then Rinpoche says, well, I said I wasn't going to talk. He said he was going to just read through the nine attitudes. But sorry, it says control. So I think I have to say something because nobody likes to be controlled, especially in the West. Nobody wants to be controlled by anybody, not even by mosquitoes. Anyway, I'm joking. He says, but if you don't understand what this verse means, you might take it the wrong way when you hear that you should put yourself under the Guru's control. However, a simple example will clarify this. If you put yourself under the control of a good friend and follow that person's advice, you too can become a good person. But if you let yourself be controlled by a bad friend, you might become a bad person yourself. If you do what a good friend says, you don't create problems for yourself or others. You only make others happy. In Liberation in the Palm of Your Hand, Bonka Denchen Yingpo talks about two people, one of whom was an alcoholic, the other who didn't drink. So the drinker went to Retting Monastery and became a teetotaler. So Retting Monastery, you know Retting? That was, Retting was founded by Domtomba, Atisha's, great Atisha's main disciple and interpreter. So after Atisha passed away, Domtomba founded really the Kadampa tradition. So we hear of these stories of the Kadampa Geshis, you know, Kadampa Geshi this, Kadampa Geshi that, you know, Geshe Langritampa, who wrote the 8 verses, was Kadampa Geshi. So they were all followers of Atisha, Domtomba, and then the lineage. So after Atisha passed away, Domtomba founded Retting Monastery up in this kind of I can't remember, it was 1 or 2 day drive from Plaza, going kind of northeast. So His Holiness has said that if he were ever able to retire to Tibet, that's where he'd stay. He'd go, you know, he wouldn't stay in the Potala, he wouldn't stay in Norbalinka, he'd go to Retting, this monastery, where all the Kadampa Geshis lived and studied and practiced. And there were all these scores of stupas to all these great Tibetan masters. Most of them have crumbled. Either they may have been intentionally destroyed by the Chinese, I'm not sure, or maybe they just crumbled. But there's a few of them that have been maintained. In particular, Geshe Potawas stupa, I remember, is that's been very well looked after. So I don't know how they chose which Geshe stupas to look after. But so Retting. So the drinker went to Retting and became a teetotaler. So it's true, I didn't see any, there were no bars at Retting. The non-drinker, so the drinker went to Retting and became a teetotaler. The non-drinker went to Lhasa, where, influenced by others, he began drinking and became an alcoholic. So each man became the complete opposite of what he was before, due to the influence of the type of friend he followed. If you listen to the advice of the Buddha, who has only compassion for sentient beings and no trace of self-centered mind, who is perfect in power, wisdom, and compassion, whose holy mind is omniscient, all you get is benefit. Putting yourself under the control of the Buddha brings you every happiness up to that of enlightenment. You get happiness now and every possible future happiness. Similarly, if you put yourself under the control of a virtuous friend, you get the same benefits as you do from putting yourself under the control of the Buddha. There's only benefit and not the slightest harm. Now, relating this teaching to those of us who met the Dharma a long time ago, if we'd been under the control of our gurus from that time forth, we would have achieved many realizations by now. We could have realized guru devotion, renunciation, bodhicitta, and emptiness. We could have received realizations of Tantra. We could have become totally liberated from samsara. We might even have become enlightened. At the very least, we would have received some lamrim realizations. But none of this has happened because we've not opened our hearts to our guru. We've not put ourselves under the control of our virtuous friend. Because of this mistake, our minds are totally devoid of any realizations whatsoever. So the first two attitudes are, may I be like an obedient son, acting exactly in accord with the Guru's advice. So when these prayers talk about son, like male, Rinpoche says it's not really, don't assume it's talking about gender. We can think, may I be like an obedient child, acting in accordance with the Guru's advice. Acting exactly in accordance with the Guru's advice. The second, even when the Maras, evil friends and the like, try to split me from the Guru, may be like a Vajra, immovable, inseparable forever. So the yogi Drupkang Tsangpa Gyari, a Kagyu Lama, said, if something goes wrong in your relationship with your Guru, even if all sentient beings become your friend, what's the use? In other words, if something damages your connection with your Guru, the auspiciousness of the relationship or your samaya, if something damages your connection with your Guru, the auspiciousness of the relationship or your samaya, your commitments to your Guru, then even if all living beings become your friend, what's the use? What can they do? What can you do? Since something has gone wrong in your relationship with your Guru, until you repair that relationship, until you do something to restore it, even if everybody becomes your friend, you cannot achieve liberation from samsara, enlightenment, or even realizations of the path. I don't remember the next verse of this Lama's teaching word for word, but the meaning is that if you maintain a good connection with your Guru, if nothing goes wrong with it, then even if all living beings desert you or become your enemy, it doesn't matter. Ordinary being would think that everybody becoming your friend or enemy is a big thing. But in Dharma practice, once you've made a connection with your Guru and not made any mistakes in the relationship, that's all that matters. Even if everybody becomes your enemy, it's of no consequence, because from the foundation of that relationship, you can attain all realizations, enjoy every success up to enlightenment. And after that, you can benefit all sentient beings by enlightening them too. That's the meaning of this great yogi's teaching. Third, when the Guru gives me work, whatever the burden, may I be like the earth, carrying all. When I devote myself to the Guru, whatever suffering occurs, may I be like a mountain, immovable. Here, suffering means hardship or problems. And when this happens, your mind should remain immovable and not be upset or discouraged. Even if I have to perform all the unpleasant tasks, may I be like a servant of the king with a mind undisturbed. May I abandon pride, holding myself lower than the Guru. May I be like a sweeper. So that's a sweeper, that's the lowest. In India, that was the lowest caste. These were the people who cleaned the toilets and stuff. May I abandon pride, holding myself lower than the Guru. May I be like a sweeper. So in India, this, I'm not sure how it is now, but In some parts of India, it's not much different from how it has always been, with a very firmly established caste system. And these lowest caste people, they don't assert themselves. They've just been completely beaten down, like you know, stray dogs, you know, kicked by everybody. And really totally humble. I'm not sure how this comes across in the West, but in the East, a sweeper is the lowest of the low. In the West, people like to think everybody's equal, but in the East, a sweeper is regarded as very low. The 7th, may I be like a rope, joyfully holding the Guru's work, no matter how difficult or heavy a burden. Even when the Guru criticizes, provokes, or ignores me, may I be like a dog without anger, never responding with anger. So no matter how much a dog gets beaten by its master, it always shows respect, never gets angry. When it sees its master coming, it starts wagging its tail and runs to lick him, showing much happiness. May I be like a ferry boat, never upset at any time to come or go for the Guru. O glorious and precious Guru, please bless me to be able to practice in this way. From now on, in all my future lifetimes, may I be able to devote myself to the Guru in this way. By reciting these words aloud and reflecting on their meaning in your mind, you will have the good fortune to be able to devote yourself correctly to the precious Guru from life to life in all your future lifetimes. If you offer service and respect and make offerings to the precious Guru with these 9 attitudes, even if you do not practice intentionally, you will develop many good qualities, collect extensive merit, and quickly achieve full enlightenment. So that's that's Shabka teaching on the 9 verses of Guru devotion. So, you know, so there are many books and teachings, you know, that we can study and read to understand more about Guru devotion. But honestly, I have to say that the way I learned about it mostly, and as I said, in those early days, the Lamas weren't teaching explicitly on the subject. Certainly not, you know, Lama Yeshe or Lama Zopa Rinpoche in those first 2 or 3 years in Kopan in those early courses. But, you know, those of us who were there were able to live at Kopan in those early years, especially before the Lama started traveling. We learned about Guru devotion by watching Rinpoche, the way Rinpoche behaved with Lama Yeshe. And because he was the embodiment of Guru devotion. And, you know, it was really, speak when you're spoken to. You know, if he wasn't asked to comment or say when they were together, Rinpoche would just sit very quietly, very humbly in Lama's presence. And he always, you know, he'd walk behind him and he'd never want to sit on the same level as Lama. And whenever Lama told him to do something, he would just jump to it straight away. Are you familiar with the slurp? Anybody familiar with the slurp? So this is a really Tibetan thing, you know. But when your guru is giving you instructions, and it may transfer to worldly workplaces. I don't know, I've never been in a Tibetan worldly workplace, but so the boss giving instructions to the workers, but when the guru is giving instructions to the disciple is going, no, 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 sort of saying yes, 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 and making the slurping sound, like sucking air in over their wet tongue, is how I describe it. No, no, no. And I mean, it's just totally subservient. You know, it's kind of really like being like an obedient dog. So that's, and when, you know, if you know, I accompanied the Lamas, Lama Yeshe and Lama Zopa Rinpoche to meet His Holiness sometimes, or to meet Ling Rinpoche, His Holiness, you know, his senior tutor, his previous life, and His Holiness Trijang Rinpoche, or Song Rinpoche, or Serkon Rinpoche. When the Lamas were there, they were sitting on the floor, their heads bowed, almost touching the floor, and slurping, you know, no, no, no. Like, it was like, and so then, you know, some of us would try and imitate them without really knowing. It was kind of pathetic, really. But, you know, I found myself slurping in front of Rinpoche sometimes, just because that's how he used to do it. It was like, I don't know, it just seemed to be the right thing to do. But anyway, just watching Rinpoche with Lama Yeshe and watching both the Lamas with His Holiness or with the other senior Lamas was physically, that's how they were our role models for acting in the presence, how to behave in the presence of your guru, which is, you know, speak when you're spoken to, and otherwise just, you know, sit there with your head bowed looking at the floor and trying to understand that this is the Buddha. One time I went with the Lamas to meet His Holiness Trijang Rinpoche, who was His Holiness junior tutor. He was the root guru of both Lama Yeshe, Lama Zopa Rinpoche. And, you know, they sat on, so Rinpoche was sitting on his bed and the Lamas were on the floor at his feet, and then I was in the back of the room sitting on the floor, sort of not knowing what, I didn't speak Tibetan, I had no idea what was going on. And then afterwards, when the interview was finished, we all went out, and then when we got outside, Lama Yeshe turned to me and he says, "Did you saw Haruka?" And I was like, "No, I didn't." And Lama, he was very disappointed. I just said, you know, no, I just saw this old monk sitting there, you know. But, so I guess from the question, the Lamas weren't sitting in the presence of this old man, they were sitting in the presence of the deity, Haruka, and that's what they were seeing. That Trijang Rinpoche, you know, Ling Rinpoche, the senior tutor, was Yamantaka, and Trijang Rinpoche was Chakrasamvara, Haruka Chakrasamvara. So, you know, I never saw them other than Tibetan monks, but that's how the Lamas were. They were sitting in the presence of Haruka. Did you saw Haruka? Not did you see Haruka? Never forget it. And I met His Holiness Trijang Rinpoche a number of times after that, but I could still never see him as Haruka. And whenever Lama came into the room, whatever Rinpoche was doing, he immediately jumped to his feet. Or you always stand in the presence of your guru, especially when they come into the room, until they tell you to sit down. But no matter how much we imitate the physical actions of Rinpoche with Lama Yeshe, that's not the main point. The main point is what's in your mind, and to feel or see that we're in the presence of the enlightened being. But again, this is not beginner's practice. This is a Vajrayana way of relating to the guru. But the whole Lam Rim, everything we're taught, is to lead us into the practice of Tantra. I mean, the whole liberation in the palm of your hand, Lam Rim Chenmo, it's all to help us develop our mind so that we have understanding, if not realization, of the three principal aspects of the path, which is the main prerequisite for practicing Tantra. If we don't have renunciation, we don't have bodhicitta, we don't have an understanding of emptiness, there's no way we can really practice Tantra. Okay, so I think that's all we have time for today. So I don't know, hope it's useful. We're halfway through, so we may as well keep going till the end of the series, I guess. We made it so far. So thank you very much for the opportunity, and let's just dedicate merit. So we generated bodhicitta at the beginning, and we looked at teachings of Lama Zopa Rinpoche and Gomchen Kampala. So we've definitely created a lot of merit. So before we have a chance to destroy that merit through getting angry or wrong views or something like that, let's dedicate the merit. So think, because of this merit that we've generated through right motivation, right action, because of this merit, may I quickly reach enlightenment for the sole purpose of enlightening all sentient beings. Okay, guys, thank you very much again, and I hope to see you. Can we go now?